Hello, thank you for joining us today. I am Jennifer DeRosa. I'm the program coordinator for energy and environmental programs at Johns Hopkins University. And thank you for joining our Lightning Talks Then and Now webinar. A little over a year ago, we reached out to our Johns Hopkins community with a challenge. And the challenge was create a 3-minute lightning talk related to Earth Day or an environmental issue that you're passionate about in preparation for the 50th anniversary of Earth Day. And a lightning talk is just what it sounds like, a lightning, fast-paced and thought-provoking talk on a focused topic. All information is packed into those 3 minutes. And the Earth Day Planning Committee, who I should introduce, which includes Dr. Jerry Burgess from the Environmental Sciences and Policy Program, Dr. Sarah Chacon from the Cultural Heritage Management Program, Phyllis Hecht, the Director of the Museum Studies Program, Dr. Kathy Wagner-Hill, the Director of Advanced Governmental Studies, and Dan Zachary, who's also here with me today, from Energy Policy and Climate, and myself. All of us worked and we're thrilled to have a flood of proposals that came in from students, alumni, and faculty in our Johns Hopkins community across the advanced academic programs. And the scope and content were thrilling to see. We had, just to give you a taste, we had a student from the Master of Liberal Arts program create an engaging lightning talk on beekeeping. We had a faculty member from the Environmental Sciences and Policy Program talking about the personal library of Rachel Carson for our history buffs out there. We had a student from the Master of Applied Economics program talking about creating green teams with corporations. So it wasn't specific to just one program. We had a wide range. And then the COVID pandemic hit and derailed our plans for an Earth Day 50 anniversary event. And our committee for Earth Day decided to feature a lightning talk each week on Johns Hopkins social media and YouTube channels with the vision of celebrating Earth Day all year long with a lightning talk. So in total, we had 45 lightning talks that played over 45 weeks. And in the lead up to Earth Day 2021, we replayed some of our favorite lightning talks to round out the year. And now I'd like to introduce my moderator, Dr. Dan Zachary.
Hello, I'm Dan Zachary, the Program Director of the Energy Policy and Climate Program. And in celebration of Earth Day 51, we've invited 4 of our Lightning Talk creators from the last year to share with you their motivations and their journey. We will begin with Daniel Williams. Now, Daniel Williams has a background in archaeology and will soon graduate from Johns Hopkins with a MS Environmental Sciences and Policy. Daniel Williams has a passion for the earth. He grew up in northern Minnesota with access to nature and the outdoors. Daniel has worked on various historic and prehistoric archaeological investigations, was a county aquatic invasive species technician responsible for the protection of over 400 lakes, and most recently worked as a park ranger for the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, where he was able to combine much of those past experiences into one job. He is also an artist and a musician. So we will now view Growing the Future by Daniel Williams.
I partnered with Cross Lake Community School, a kindergarten to middle level school, to grow 1,000 containerized white pine trees from seed. The school is perfect for this, as they're already deeply committed to environmental education, and they also have a solarium that's ready to use. Located in north-central Minnesota, Cross Lake and to the northeast of the state are within an area designated by the DNR as a white pine restoration area. But beyond this, there are a few reasons why we chose white pines over other trees. Generations coming up will be of critical importance in solving the greatest environmental problem that humans have ever faced: climate change. White pines are a long-lived species. This means that they will sequester carbon for longer periods of time than other species. They can withstand a warming climate. As Minnesota will become warmer, we are in need of forests that will not die out as a result. When white pines are harvested, they are typically used as building materials. Even in use as wood for homes, cabinets, and flooring, they still hold the carbon that they took in. This will extend the sequestration period even longer. The vision for this program is that the kindergartners will plant the seeds and care for them in the solarium, and older grade levels will transplant them into their permanent locations. Those trees can be mapped using GPS and cataloged and plotted in GIS by the older students. My hope is that students learn more than just how to grow trees. I want them to have a vision and be able to make that vision reality. Rooting for Tomorrow is a program that grows as students grow, but it's more than trees. We are growing students that will care about this world.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Daniel. So we would like to ask you a question, Daniel, following that inspiring video. Daniel, in your talk on Growing the Future, you focus on white pines in Minnesota. Can you also talk about your vision for this 3-minute talk, especially with regards to the choices you made in its creation?
Sure. So first I'd like to say I'm honored to be here, so thank you for inviting me. For this question, it probably helps to know a little bit of the background. So I obviously did the lightning talk off of the project that I was working on as part of this master's program, which I was developing in the sustainability leadership course. That was January 2020. So this is like right before COVID really becomes a thing. And so there was no plans for COVID at all. It was just meant, kids would grow these trees through their school. They'd be kind of active in it every day, watering it and doing those type of things. But it soon became apparent that it was kind of not just about growing trees, because in our area, we're going to start growing trees in the next month or so. And so there will be tree planting events and stuff that are kind of centered around that. So I wanted it to be a little more than just the growing trees. And so it became apparent that the program could kind of develop with kids as they go. And so it turned into being an inspiration, like I'm trying to inspire you. So the lightning talk kind of came about right at the right time when I figured out, if this project's going to be more about inspiration, then maybe we could extend it to a broader audience. So loved making the video. It was kind of like living out a little dream of doing some movie score. So I actually got to write the music and record the music for the video. And so the purpose of that was, it started simple and just kind of slowly built and built until the kind of this climax at the end, and then it kind of fell off and would kind of leave you with a feeling of inspiration or hope. And that was kind of what I was going for. And then the images associated with that are kind of in that same type of thing. So they started out, you could see that white pine that was cut, pretty good sized tree too, that I kind of zoom in and kind of focus across. That tree was actually maybe 20 yards from our house. It wasn't our tree, but I basically saw it every single day that I walked outside. And so I knew, like, I want to put that in there. And I purposely desaturated the colors so that they're not very vibrant. The goal was kind of to play on that emotional aspect of, yes, this tree is cut down, but like when we look at like logging, it was not sustainable logging. It was literally, we just clear cut everything. And so the idea was to kind of bring in that kind of sadness as a way to then bring you to the hope. Um, I would say my favorite image in the talk was the little girl that's playing in the forest. That kind of captures the whole thing. That is actually my daughter. Um, and she's in kindergarten, which is, she's part of my inspiration for this because she actually gets to plant the seeds her first year of school. And so she'll get to grow with these trees. And so, yeah, it was a privilege. I was very excited to make this.
Oh, that's great. That's always inspiring to include your kids.
Yeah.
So the world is a very different place than a year ago. So, of course, we've all been dealing with COVID-19 pandemic and all its consequences. So since the Rooting for Tomorrow program relied on a contribution from a local school, how did that impact your progress with this project?
So it changed everything. So initially, we basically got the approval to do the project right before COVID. This is in like February. The plan was all kind of set in place. We already had budgets for what we needed, donations, everything. And of course, the plan was that kids would be watering these by hand every day and taking care of them. And so when COVID hit and kids were no longer in school, it fully changed it. So everything was about kind of adaptation to keep it going. And I wasn't even really positive that we were going to make it um, where we could actually keep it going, but we did figure out ways to do it. So um, kids were not in school, so we made kind of like material bags that had like the planters, and they had um, the soil and the seeds, and we actually had parents come and pick them up and bring them back. Their kids planted all the seeds. They put their name on it, so we knew which tray was those kids' plantings, and they brought them back. And at this time, we didn't know a lot about COVID, but we did know that, hey, if we leave them out for 48 hours, maybe, you know, the COVID's not going to still exist on the plants. And so we handled them with gloves and did everything and brought them in. And we tried to follow the policy as best as we could. But then, of course, kids were still not in school. So I was lucky enough to, you know, in that sustainability leadership course, one of the things we learned is that if you get like an ambassador that really loves the project, you know, they can kind of spread that to other people. Well, I was lucky enough to get, my ambassador was the director of the school, and he was like, whatever we want to do, let's make this happen, whatever budget you need, let's make this project happen. So um, I was lucky enough to have that. And so we ended up buying this water system that we put together that we could automatically water the trees and actually control like the amount of watering and um, timing of the watering through an app on the phone. So nobody even had to be there. Um, we figured it out, and it was kind of hard, difficult to figure out how much we needed to water them and how long it needed to go without people being there. But we did figure out how to make it work. Kids have been in school now at this school because it's kind of small for the last 2 months. So they are back in school. They're taking care of them, doing what they're needing to do. And the project will end up being a success. We are planting them on DNR land that we partnered with next month. And so the DNR is providing all the equipment. They're going to come out and show kids how to plant them and do a teaching thing. And then even from there, it's now gone on. We partnered with the DNR even farther to have what's called a school forest, where they're going to teach like management practices of the forest. And we actually get to plant some of our white pine trees in that forest too, which is like right on the school property. So kids will be able to see their own trees with their names on them grow. So even with COVID, adaptation was super important, but we made it work.
Thank you, Daniel.
That's really
Okay.
exciting to hear
Yeah.
that you guys were able to make it work despite the challenges with COVID. I'm going to introduce our next panelist too next, but I want to remind our viewers that if you have a question for any of our Lightning Talk creators, we're going to have plenty of time later for you to ask questions to our Lightning Talk creators. You can always type your question in the chat, and we'll get to those in a little bit. So feel free to type any questions you have in the chat. Our next Lightning Talk creator is Carlos Hernandez. Carlos has been working in the museum-related activities and industry for over 25 years. He started working as a tour guide for the San Juan History Museum before completing his graduate studies in the Master of Arts Museum Studies program at Syracuse University. And he worked as a collections manager and later as a director of the Ponce History Museum. His interest in sharing his knowledge and experience in the field led to a teaching opportunity at the college level while pursuing a doctoral degree in history of the Americas. He's been working as a consultant in recent years in areas like planning and collections, collections management, and exhibitions development for public and private institutions. And among his main interests in the field are the use of technology and sustainability. And I'd like to share with you now his a screening of his lightning talk, Leading by Example, Sustainability in Museums.
Welcome to this presentation, Leading by Example, Sustainability in Museums. Hi, my name is Carlos Hernandez. Did you know that museums come in different sizes and shapes? But what they all have in common is their mission to collect, care and preserve for their collection. It is that mission that makes them the right institutions to lead by example on the road toward a more sustainable future. What is sustainability? Sustainability refers to the goal of meeting the needs of the present without compromising future generations' ability to meet their own needs, basically making the best use of the resources available. And what can we do? One of the things that we can do is commit to the Green Museum Accord. The Green Museum Accord consists of 5 action steps. Number 1. Commit. Publicly declare your institution's commitment to environmental sustainability and stewardship. 2. Evaluate. Make environmental sustainability part of the institutional thought process on every major decision and project. 3. Implement. Make sustainable choices when selecting vendors, products, and processes. Reduce your museum's ecological footprint using best practices, measurable strategies, benchmarks, and targets. 4. Educate. Involve visitors, staff, colleagues, board members, vendors, and other stakeholders in active learning and discussion around environmental sustainability and sustainable museum practices. 5. Share. Advance the understanding of environmental issues in the museum community and inspire others to action by contributing actively to the professional dialogue and knowledge base. But did you know that the most important reason why museums need to lead by example is that museums are trusted? According to the American Alliance of Museums, the American public considers museums the most trustworthy source of information in America. Also, we should not forget that climate change is impacting people everywhere today, not in a distant future. It affects lives, communities, and national economies. Affordable, scalable solutions are being developed to promote more resilient economies, and museums can lead this movement in their communities.
Thank you for your lightning talk, Carlos. So I have a couple of questions for you after your wonderful lightning talk. In your talk, you have a lot of information that you convey very quickly and clearly with regard to museums and sustainability. I was curious, was there a particular museum or museums that you had in mind as inspiration when you were creating your talk?
Yes, thanks. I appreciate it, and thanks again for asking me to be here. I really enjoyed. The thing is that when I did my first video, it was like 12 minutes long because I included samples of like 7 or 8 different museums that were taking action regarding sustainable practices. But in the end, of course, I realized I have to short it down, and I focus on one specifically, which is the California Academy of Sciences, which opened a new building in 2008. And actually, that building is very interesting because it has been granted the LEED Platinum rating 2 times. And also, it's a great example of how you can include sustainability practices in design of the building because they, for example, have what they call a living roof. It's planted and it's over the actual building. So it used skylights and windows to light the room instead of requiring interior lighting, which is becoming one of the key issues in discussions in museums moving forward. Also, and this is one of the key reasons why I selected that is that they have an official statement from the Board of Trustees a green team in the museum. And one of the things that I have seen when I was working on this is that for an institution like a museum to move forward and implement many of these practices, there has to be a commitment from everybody. Sometimes you start with one person and then that person tries to develop or create something and a program or a committee, but that really doesn't help that much. Sometimes it does, but when you have the commitment from everybody, I think that's basically a guarantee that you're going to move forward and that you have a good chance of really making a difference, which is why, of course, we are looking at this option of leading by example. And one of the reasons why this is important is because the museum really that's what it does. We collect and preserve for the future. As I was saying in the video, we are trusted. And because the way we work, we are a good starting point for discussion on top and many topics that are important to our society. And eventually, based on those activities, we try to engage with the public. So hopefully we develop a dialogue with the community and the society in general that eventually could lead to really getting these ideas and this discussion out. And I hopefully something that will come out from this situation as the pandemic hopefully improves in the upcoming months.
And to what extent, or I guess, how many museums follow the Green Museums Accord? And I guess, as a person who loves museums and really wants to help support this effort from an activist perspective, how can someone like me encourage museums who aren't part of this to go in that direction?
And right now, there are 19 museums that are part of this. But the important thing is that this uh, movement, the Green Museum Accord, starting in California, serves as an inspiration for the American Alliance of Museums to then start their own program, which is called the Environment and Climate Network. And then something that happened by the end of last year is that the American Alliance of Museums joined the Climate Heritage Network, which is a bigger support network for institutions in the art, the humanities, and other organizations that are trying to work together to promote sustainable practices. The way I see this is that now we're seeing a lot of activity in social media and websites from the museums. It's easier to identify who and what institution is doing what. So in my opinion, the best way to do this, and actually the Green Museum Accord has a page that you can sign in as an individual. But the point is that when you have a museum that you like, either that you follow on social media or that you are able to visit because it's close to you or actually doing your travels, what you can do, of course, is to engage someone there and follow them and give your name and contact information, and then they will get back to you and tell you about some opportunities. And this actually is a great thing about what museums do. And we're talking, of course, also about zoos and aquariums, because I remember in the 90s, I was part of a project. I visited a zoo in Portland, and I came back to Puerto Rico, and I was able of a program that we were giving people the opportunity to go out and do some bird watching activities, and then get some information and share it back with the museum and the zoo. So, things like that really make a big difference. And I think that the bigger net that we can be a bill is going to help everybody really have a chance and understand, okay, even if I'm here, I can be part of this process. And eventually the goal is that from where each one of us is living or is acting in this area, then we can really bring people that really doesn't know or doesn't understand how important this is right now.
Thanks, Carlos. And one other question is, I know it's been a rough year for any indoor location where people have to gather. So how would you say museums and their sustainability initiatives have fared in the last year, just overall?
Unfortunately, not well, because of course the pandemic hit everybody hard. And then the problem here is that when we look at the way museums operate, basically 25% and 40%, a total of around 60% of the funds that the museum generates depends on the museum being open to the public, working or operating regular. The problem here is that it has changed. It has affected the how much money and funds come into the museum. And of course, the museum have to make decisions about how they're going to use the funds that they have available. We are seeing a lot of samples that they're focusing, of course, on keeping staff in and making sure that the museum keeps operating as normal as usual to keep the collection safe. So that's one of the things that are happening. But a great thing that also happening is that this is going to provide a lot of opportunities for museums to come together. I saw, for example, actually yesterday, an article came out about this very interesting effort taking place in Philadelphia, that several institutions came together to share fundraising programs, to share and collaborate in developing future public programming, and also in sharing resources. The idea is that we have to understand that, of course, we have the big and well-known museums, but we have a lot of mid and small museums that do a great job and really have a great impact in their community. We're seeing also this, that museums, especially small ones, are becoming community centers. They're providing spaces and even sharing and distributing food and other articles like for personal safety. So as I said, they are becoming part and engaging the people. And hopefully that will continue and make sure that we understand that this is really an opportunity and take advantage of it and be more inclusive in our activities regarding the communities we serve.
Thank you, Carlos. It's good to hear that museums have been supportive during this time. And I'm hoping that as things slowly are able to reopen, they're able to focus more on their sustainability initiatives as we move forward. And I think we'd like to introduce our next Lightning Talk creator, Dan.
Yes, we're going to introduce our next speaker. That will be Justine Parati. Now, Justine is a Johns Hopkins student studying her master's in energy policy and climate. Justine comes from a geology and engineering background and hoping to learn more about renewable technologies and policies to create a cleaner planet in the future. So this year, Justine has been interning remotely with the earthday.org through her Africa program and has helped develop a podcast to share the stories of how youths in Africa have been combating climate change in their area. We'd now like to show Earth Day Africa by Justine Parati.
Hello, my name is Justine Parati, and I wanted to tell you a little bit about Earth Day Africa. This program is an extension of the Earth Day Network, which I was fortunate enough to become a volunteer for. With this presentation, I hope to show you that Earth Day Network's team in Africa provides a platform for citizens to air their views on the state of the environment using digital tools to show how they can contribute to environmental protection. Earth Day Africa began last September when coordinators from Kenya, Tanzania, the Gambia, Zimbabwe, Uganda, Cameroon, Dominican Republic of Congo, Niger, and Senegal joined together with Earth Day Network to mobilize volunteers, organizations in their countries to participate in educational events, tree planting initiatives, cleanups, and climate strikes in preparation for Earth Day's 50th anniversary. The hard work paid off, and 25 million people participated in Earth Day in Africa, according to reports gathered by staff members on the ground. Currently, the Africa program is leading the charge with the My Future, My Voice Ambassador program, with nearly 50 representatives for 30 sub-Saharan countries. The program has provided young, intelligent, diverse, and influential voices a platform with Earth Day Network to communicate, discuss, and share best practices. Along with restoration efforts, currently countries are creating toolkits, interactive lesson plans, hosting webinar discussions, creating forums via Facebook and WhatsApp to bring like-minded organizations, professionals, and youth together to share their best practices and communicate to develop solutions. The key is to form networks and partner with one another to continue the mission of Earth Day and develop strong networks globally. The larger graphic below shows Earth Day Network volunteers in sub-Saharan Africa based on regional populations, with those volunteers highlighted in blue. If you're interested in finding out more information about Earth Day Africa, you can go to the website at earthday.org/Africa, or you can find us on Facebook at Earth Day Africa or on Twitter at Earth Day Africa 1. Coming soon will be the Instagram account that will be found at Earth Day Africa, and hopefully the generation of a podcast that will highlight ambassadors and other efforts that are being made by the organization. Lastly, I want to make some acknowledgments to especially Matt Leffler, the manager of Earth Day Africa, and the rest of the Africa staff members for making such an amazing project in such a short time.
Thank you, Justine. You certainly shed light on the Earth Day African movement. I appreciate that.
So basically I joined the program in August of actually 2020, like in the midst of the pandemic. And I found out a lot about, and I just had started with the program when I made that, and I actually have started developing a podcast. We have a couple episodes out already, and the Instagram is up and running now.
Oh, that's great. That's great. One curiosity from your talk is there something that you see about Earth Day Africa that's unique compared to, say, the global Earth Day movement, and how did you try to capture that in your lightning talk?
I think I had a similar problem as Carlos, where like I had such a lot of material, and I apologize for the audio. I was going between two computers, and it was very difficult, and like I could not get the sound right, and I should have put background music like the previous ones. But I think with Earth Day Africa, I found it very interesting on how countries in the sub-Saharan have gone through the struggles of climate change in a different way, with not having I'm not trying to I think basically taking place with like not as many technologies and not as advanced environmental technologies to help solve the problem, and how they've been trying to promote environmental education and into their programs more. And I believe this program has really taught me about challenges that they have faced within Africa. I talked to a woman that is going to be in the next podcast episode about how she visited a place in Nigeria, and she saw like how coal power plant or coal mining was polluting the environment, polluting the water, and like the people just didn't understand how something in such close proximity could be polluting their lives and like getting into the intestines of like even their drinking supply or their food when they like catch fish from the river. And it was very interesting to like learn about people that might not know as much about environmental hazards as we do.
That's great. That's great. I'm curious, do you know of other Earth Day movements in other continents in Asia?
Yeah, there is Earth Day in South Asia, and there's also one in South Africa. These are just regional networks. I am under the head of the Earth Day Africa one, so I'm not like helping with the whole organization. My focus is on Africa with like partners that we've worked with, and I also got to learn about conservation arts. He made the music for the podcast, and he has created this program throughout Malawi and spreading awareness through art and music and all this stuff. And he made a really nice like intro music and transitional music for our podcast. And I wish I could have showcased that here in this talk.
Appreciate that. And of course, we'd be remiss if we didn't ask you about, of course, the last year events. Have you been, as you've been working on Earth Day Africa throughout the pandemic, how has your work changed as a result?
I wasn't with the program before the pandemic. I've been in it like during the whole pandemic. So I think the most challenging part is just differencing like time zones, because we were working with a lot of people in Southern Africa and in the Sub-Saharan, and making sure like our times meet up at like, so it's not interrupting either person's like livelihood, or just like an equal time that we can both like get on Zoom and communicate together, which sometimes makes it difficult for the podcast with recording when someone's running around or doesn't have as great of an audio.
Sure. Well, we appreciate seeing Earth Day celebrated throughout the world. Thank you for your presentation, bringing that celebration of Africa. Thank you. I think we're now
Thank you,
going to
Justine. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, Dan.
No problem. No problem.
I'm now going to introduce our last lightning talk creator, Chris Morgan. Chris graduated from Johns Hopkins Master of Arts in Writing program with focus in fiction in December of 2019. Chris holds a Master of Arts in Great Books from St. John's College and a PhD in Contemporary Poetry from the University of Wales in the United Kingdom. Chris lives in Annapolis, not too far from me actually, in Annapolis, Maryland, where he works as an academic assistant principal and continues to write fiction and poetry. And I'd like to show you all Chris's lightning talk titled "The Environment as Other, Conflating the Myth."
My name is Chris Morgan. I'm an alumnus of the writing program in fiction at Johns Hopkins University. And this is my lightning talk, Environment as Other. Okay, so a lightning talk should include electricity, the kind that wakes us up. During the evacuation of Santa Cruz County, my son sent me pictures of night at midday, of the sun eclipsed by the smoke of the CZU lightning complex fire on its way to devouring 86,000 acres of living earth. Pictures of a city gone gray, layered in apocalyptic ash. Are 11,000 lightning bolts sparking 7,718 wildfires, razing 3.5 million acres of the state of California enough to wake us up? See, a mistake we humans keep making as we face or deny the crisis of planetary climate change and extinction is our perspective on nature as other, as that, as it. This is a foundational fallacy. It's a heuristic construct and a fatal blind spot. Robin Kimmerer writes that grammar is how we chart relationships through language, including our relationship with the earth. Linguistic imperialism crafts separations that pave the way to objectification and exploitation. So what's the relationship between the fires laying waste the American West and the fires for racial equity and justice that have broken out in cities all over the country? What fuel lines run between them, feeding the burning? Amid firefighters in the redwoods and paramilitary assault troops at the courthouse, who will consider the common source? Here's the question of hope. Can we reach through the illusion of otherness and separation to the reality of interdependence, to the necessary radiance of diversity? Hope means understanding the Buddhist wisdom that there is no I apart from you, whether the pronoun referent is human or animal or plant. Maybe we need to sit quietly amidst the chaos for a moment with Jackson Pollock's declaration, "I do not paint nature, I am nature." Maybe we need to sit with Dylan Thomas's declaration, "The force that blasts the roots of trees is my destroyer." Maybe we should consider whether a world without tigers or insects can accommodate the human species, whether an earth without the Tongass forest or the Borneo Islands can be handed on to our children as anything more than a place of despair and longing and acceptance of the dark end of things. Will the lightning wake us up?
I get goosebumps every time I listen to your lightning talk, Chris. Thank you for that. So I have to ask, what led you in your life to the insight that we are interconnected with nature and not separated from it? And how has that influenced you as a writer?
Yeah, thank you so much, Jen. And I'm really honored to be a part of this. I feel like the collaboration of voices that we're doing right here is the way forward. This ground level talk, and I love it. I love hearing these other ideas and views. So thank you. Um, I think that realization that you're talking about, I didn't have that as a child as a sort of articulated knowledge, but I felt it nonetheless. It was foundational in me, and I've thought about this question quite a bit in my life. I really don't know where that comes from. In some ways, I think it's coming through both lines of my family to me. But I did absolutely have that, and I still have that today. The feeling that there's an electric connection for me between the natural world and my own consciousness and life, and I've sort of followed that throughout my life and my writing now as well. But I think the articulation of it came, when I started to read literature, say, 19th century New England transcendentalism, the late poet W.S. Merwin, Whitman, on and on and on, to hear the echo of what I felt as a child, growing up and, exposed to the ocean, the rivers, the Chesapeake Bay where I live, sort of living in a constantly out of doors life. And then I started reading deeply. I think that's where it became articulated in my own head that this was a conscious thing. The greatest articulation that I know of currently is the famous Buddhist teacher and monk, Thich Nhat Hanh, who invented the word interbeing, and Thich Nhat Hanh says we inter-are, and that's not a romantic idea for him. It is a scientific idea, and sometimes I think that's really important for us to realize right now. My own writing place is absolutely central to it. I think Hemingway wrote a letter to John Dos Passos in the 30s that said, whatever you do, get the weather in your goddamn book. It's important. And I feel like the weather and the natural setting, it's not a conscious thing for me. I am now aware of it, but it is always a character in what I'm writing, whether that's poetry or fiction, or nonfiction. I do write some nonfiction as well. So that has it's just where I sort of find myself, is in that context of that childhood understanding that's in the bones. Sort of an intellectual awakening to that through reading, and then onward into my own writing.
That's really nice to hear you talk about that. And another thing I'm thinking of right now is people have been through a lot in the last year. We feel very disconnected. We also feel very disconnected. Thinking back, it's been 51 years since the first Earth Day. We feel, in some ways, people feel very disconnected from the environment, from the earth, from nature. I wonder, as a writer, and talking to you as a writer, and it's nice to hear your thoughts about how writing can be used. To what extent can writing be used as a tool to have people reflect and reevaluate their views of nature and the environment, but also maybe of you talk a bit about environmental justice in your lightning talk as well, and given the turn of events this week, I want to also throw that in there. So how can, in your views, how can writing be used as a tool to have people reflect and reevaluate on their views of nature and their connection with nature and even environmental justice?
Such a great question, and there's so much there. That is just a really rich area. I feel that deserves exploration. So you know, the first part of that, the second part of that was the environmental justice part. And you can sort of see in my talk, and I don't know how I feel about my lightning talk yet. Every time I watch it, I have different feelings about it. I can definitely see where my head was at the time. But I feel like anyone who picks up a pen or heads to the keyboard or picks up a pencil and decides to write authentically, either fiction or nonfiction or poetry, if they're doing that, they're going to run up against the question of the great question of identity. Who, what, and why am I? Um, and I don't think that's escapable if we're being true to ourselves. And I think if we follow that notion, we're going to wind up understanding a little bit more about this idea of interbeing, of relational intimacy with the earth, with ourselves, with our ancestors, with the people we're close to, with our children, with our animals. I think that that's almost inescapable if we are trying to write authentically. And I think once we get to that point, we start to look at it not just as it goes out in circles from there. So what is happening in society in terms of our interbeing with the other? So it's obviously not nature, that the natural world is not the only thing that has been othered. This is an encompassing idea. That's what I really want to conflate. It's difficult to talk too deeply about, but to conflate that means to say there is dignity, there is sameness, there is difference to be celebrated that makes us diverse and beautiful and powerful. And to deny that is, to me, an act of suicide. Ultimately, it's an act of self-destruction, and I feel that very deeply. I feel like one of the great things that has happened over the last year is there is this tremendous sense of urgency emerging. There is now talk of how long will we survive? How will we interrelate with one another at various levels? And we can now say that we have a tremendous grief and a tremendous upset and angst and anxiety and about the state of that interbeing, whether that's societal, natural, or what have you. And I think that is the fact that that is being voiced and is, to me, is a really giant step that we just have to take as a country and a world and a people.
That's a very good point. Thank you for sharing your thoughts on that.
Thank you.
I want to make sure we leave time for questions. So we've got about 12 minutes left. I think as we're giving people time, thank you, Justine, for sharing that link for the Earth Day Africa. As we give our viewers time to ask questions in the Q&A, we have some general questions for our panelists that we can ask while people are adding questions in the Q&A chat. Dan, would you like to ask the next one?
Sure, absolutely. So first of all, thank you all panelists. So one question is, one of the things that we've tried to do here in the Lightning Talks is to transform Earth Day celebration from a one-day event to a one-year focus. In your own work, how do you promote the Earth Day awareness, its alignment, and its action throughout the year in your work? That's open to anyone.
Well, let me start because I'm a teacher. So the easiest answer is in class. So this is one of the main topics that I discuss in class, and it also has several assessments that are interconnected because I teach collection management in museums, and one of the key terms is risk management. So we have to look at all the potential threats and risks to the museum, to the staff, to the collections, to the buildings, etc. So this plays a big role, and it's something that we have to consider year-round, especially if you have seasonal changes. One of my favorite activities that I share a video from YouTube about a guy falling from the roof because of the amount of snow that accumulated in the roof. So if you don't think about that, it's keep, collecting and collecting, and all of a sudden, the roof cannot sustain that weight. So it's the little things that really uh, help us make a difference. And in this sense, it's going to be the little things that allow us to move forward to more sustainable practices.
Thank you. Thank you.
For me, I'll take that question too. For me, I was lucky enough where working as a park ranger for the Army Corps, it was kind of like part of my job title was doing some sort of interpretation for nature. And so I was lucky enough where it was kind of a focus every day. And so, Earth Day is a good time where people can kind of focus on this at one day. But of course, it should be every day. It's not, the Earth is not here one day. We need to be focusing on this all the time. Um, and so it, especially this year, I would say it took like a conscious effort. The world's very loud. And so you have to kind of make a point to do these type of things and try to provide like different ways that the community can get involved through the different seasons, like you were saying, whether that's like snowshoeing, in the winter, but then also, just giving people the opportunity to participate and have it continue to be in their mind throughout the year, I think would certainly help with this.
Thanks. That's great. That's great.
I wanted to mention that we have, before I miss it, we have a question in the chat that's actually for Daniel. Our viewer mentions she works at an elementary school and would love her students to conduct a tree planting. Do you have a recommendation on where to purchase trees, or is there a source that will donate trees to school?
So in my personal experience, there was kind of a lot of little background research that I had to know. So you actually have to get a genetic variety of seeds related to your area. And so a lot of times you're looking for this, you want local sources. So I had called to all the seed organization, companies in Minnesota, and none of them had white pine trees because apparently 2019 was a bad year for their growth. And so nobody had them. So I found my seeds out in Massachusetts that fit my area, which is really interesting how that all worked. But I did find that a lot of the local seed companies were very willing to help. They were like excited that this stuff was going on, and local greenhouses were willing to donate different like trays and stuff that I needed and different supplies. But the seeds itself we did pay for, but it was only about $30 for about 1,400 seeds, and that's with shipping. So it wasn't like a very expensive project to have a school take on. So the other supplies you might need to look for donations and things like that, but it is something that people in the community are willing to get behind.
That's great. That sounds like a lot of seeds. And just a reminder too, you guys viewers can post questions in the chat. We still have a few minutes left. Another question for any panelists that would like to answer is, it's great to have so many of you from different backgrounds: writing, environmental sciences, energy and climate, and museums. And our talk today, in our title, it was Then and Now. And I know implicitly that was referring to sort of like 2020 and now 2021. But we've looked at that sort of from that perspective. But I'd kind of like to hear from you guys collectively or individually, how you think the Earth Day movement has evolved since its inception in 1970 to today, just from your own perspectives. How has that movement changed? For anyone who'd like to take it.
I'll share my experience quickly. And the first time actually I came into contact, or I realized that this was going on, was when I went to the university here in Puerto Rico. Really outside of it, you didn't hear much. We didn't do anything at the school level, so it was a surprise for me. And there were specific organizations within the university that were part of this. And what I'm seeing now is that more and more people, especially young people, and also many of them are coming out of the university, are really starting to have more of a voice, especially because of the opportunities of tech and social media. And it's becoming easier and more common to be exposed and find information about the different efforts. There are a lot of preservation and conservation efforts in Puerto Rico, but you don't hear about them if you don't look for them. So that's also improving. So in that sense, basically people are understanding what's happening. And this relates to one of the big issues that we have here as a society or a community, is that we are not good at planning for the future here in Puerto Rico. We are more like a present approach. So if we need to change that, and I think that the younger generation realizes, and that's going to make a big difference. And they are really taking part of this and be more active and using social media as an excellent tool for this.
Yeah, thanks. I really like that, hearing that as well. I feel like over the years, Earth Day has become much more mainstream. It's gone from something that was maybe tolerated to something that was accepted to something that was embraced today. And the connotation for me is, and I think Dan mentioned this, is that we're mindful on that day. And if we could carry that mindfulness into the other days as well. And I completely agree with Carlos. Young people are doing that, and it's inspirational. And so there's a sense, I think there's a great sense of urgency that is really important right now, and before it's too late.
Yeah, thank you. It is interesting to see how far things have come, but we always still feel like it's not enough. So I think that's often the sentiment that we hear a lot of. And we are kind of running out of time. So there's one thing I do want to remind people about. I want to first thank our viewers for joining us today, and I want to thank our panelists for joining us today. And thank our Lightning Talk creators for putting in the effort to make such wonderful Lightning Talks that we were able to air this year, and for blending their artistic skill with their talents and putting together the time to create those to help inform the masses about the projects they're working on, and to make the world a better place. As we close, I'd like to invite our viewers to join us for our second Earth Day event on Earth Day itself, which is going to be tomorrow, April 22nd at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. This event will feature a panel discussion on living environmentalism, and that will include a panel of scholars, researchers, and practitioners. They will discuss current environmental challenges facing our planet and how we can move towards solutions and change. And now, as a teaser to get you primed for tomorrow's event and to end on a compelling note, I'm going to leave you with a lightning talk, because hey, it's our lightning talk day, with a lightning talk created by Dr. Kathy Wagner-Hill, called "From Rachel to Greta: Environmentalism's Origins and Impacts."
Happy Earth Day 50. I'm Kathy Wagner-Hill, Director of the Johns Hopkins Center for Advanced Governmental Studies, and this lightning talk is "From Rachel to Greta: Environmentalism's Origins and Impacts." The more clearly we can focus our attention on the wonders and realities of the universe about us, the less taste we shall have for its destruction. With those words, Rachel Carson, who earned her master's in marine biology from Hopkins, sparked the modern environmental movement. In her 1962 book, Silent Spring, she brought worldwide attention to the perils of pesticides for our planet. Despite vicious attacks from industry, her work held up, and in 1972, the Nixon administration banned the use of DDT in the U.S. Fast forward to 2018, when Swedish teenager Greta Thunberg began her school strike for the climate movement, catalyzing a new surge of global environmental activism fueled by social media. In the 50 years between the work of these environmental revolutionaries, though the topics and tools have changed, the need for action has only grown, leaving broad agreement with Greta that yes, hope comes from action. The first Earth Day, along with Silent Spring, is credited with launching the modern environmental movement and reflects the dual origins of environmentalism in both science and grassroots efforts. Dennis Hayes dropped out of Harvard Law to organize the first Earth Day as an outgrowth of work he did with Senator Gaylord Nelson, organizing teach-ins and trash cleanups and such across the country. Citizens wanted action, and the federal government responded. More regulatory laws passed between 68 and 79 in the previous 179 years of the nation. The three takeaways from environmentalism are: laws matter, especially in the U.S., but also internationally. What we know from the previous 50 years is that laws do mean protection that otherwise doesn't happen. Second, science matters. The idea that science and technology can solve or reduce environmental problems dates to the progressive era of Teddy Roosevelt and takes us to that tension between preservation and conservation. But what we know is that science and technology can advance environmental protection. Third, citizens matter. Citizen protests and lobbying continue to push all governments at all levels to act. The 1970s were primarily top-down federal legislating. By the 1990s, Earth Day went global. Now in the U.S., state and local actions drive climate policy and other matters. Truly, the 1970s mantra, think globally, act locally, is playing out 50 years later. Greta declares that we can't just continue living as if there was no tomorrow, because there is a tomorrow. And the Greta effect is driving increased activism. Her UN address went viral, and she became Time Magazine's 2019 Person of the Year. Rachel was right. We have to focus on the wonders and realities of the universe about us, and we must live for tomorrow, because 50 years later, Greta's also right. Hope comes from action.